Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to my wonderful book summary and discussion about the book we read in class. This is for my seminar class here at University of Southern Mississippi, and we are talking about crucial conversations, tools for talking when the stakes are high. So here's a presentation overview. This is just what we're going to talk about today. The bulk of this presentation is going to be spent talking just about chapter summaries of each of the 11 chapters, including titles and a short discussion about what happened in the chapter. Then I'll run you through the overall takeaways, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on a very short review of the book. So starting with chapter 1, the book asks, what is a crucial conversation and who cares? So it drops us a cute little definition of what a crucial conversation is. It specifically says interactions that happen to everyone, day-to-day conversations that affect your life. And this is a very broad category. And so then it takes us through what makes them crucial, how do we handle crucial conversations usually, and problems that add to that difficulty. So conversations are made crucial because opinions vary, stakes are high, emotions run strong, and there's a high potential for impact. These are conversations that are going to touch you in your daily life. Something's going to happen because of this conversation. It gives us 3 methods that we typically handle crucial conversations. There are 2 bad ones. We can avoid them, we just run away from them. Maybe we face them and we don't do such a good job, they go poorly, bad things happen. And this book is trying to get us to face them and then handle them well. That's what we're trying to learn in this book. And so then they just list the problems that make them difficult. One of the biggest ones is that your body will fall into fight or flight mode. The spontaneity of this type of conversation will put you under pressure, which leads back to your body falling into fight or flight mode. And maybe you don't know where to start, or your behavior is just self-defeating. So chapter 2, Mastering Crucial Conversations, is about the power of dialogue. Dialogue is the free flow of meaning between 2 or more people, and you will note that it says the free flow. This is because this book often views dialogue as literally putting information into a shared, basically, swimming pool. So we come back to this sort of language a lot. This chapter also notes that dialogue skills are learnable and gives us a very clear goal, which is to create conditions in the conversation within yourself and others that make dialogue the path of least resistance, makes that what you want to be doing in this conversation. So we have goals here to reach this overall goal, and those are to learn the key skills of talking, listening, and acting together, and then master the tools for talking when the stakes are high. So then we start getting out of background information. Those first 2 chapters were really mostly background information. Now we're going to start talking about what this book really wants you to be doing. So chapter 3 is start with the heart, how to stay focused on what you really want, the how of dialogue, if you will. It gives you 2 focuses. Your first focus should be on yourself and your behavior. You're the only person you can control. That's what you should be focusing on. And your secondary focus, which is about yourself, is what do you actually want out of this conversation. So it gives you a list of 3 things to do in order to make sure that this actually happens. First, you should establish what you want. What is it that you want out of this conversation? Where are you going? And establish what you don't want. What are we not trying to do? We don't want to cause any problems. How do we avoid that? And then we are going to combine those 2 things, what you want and what you don't want, and create a solvable problem. We move on, chapter 4, Learn to Look, how to notice when safety is at risk. This chapter is all about paying attention to other people. Learn to look at other people in order to maintain open dialogue. So it gives you 3 things to look for. First, you have to look at yourself. This is the previous chapter again, but it's important. Look at yourself. Note when you are experiencing fear responses and figure out how to make that not happen. Then you're going to look at other people. Watch for other people's fear responses. They note 2 different types of fear responses. Silence is when you're refusing to add dialogue to the dialogue pool. You're too scared to put something out. And then there's violence. That's when you go and attack someone else. Basically the difference between defense and offense in a conversation. And then overall, just watch and maintain your own behavior in order to help affect the feeling of safety. Safety is the probably #1 thing that they want you to get out of this book. As you can see here in the next chapter, make it safe. How to make it safe to talk about almost anything, because people have to feel safe in order to want to put anything into the pool. If they're not safe, they're either going to attack you or they're going to be very silent. They're not going to say anything. So they want you to maintain two things in order to maintain safety. The first one is mutual purpose. You want everyone to be on the same page, literally have a mutual purpose, work toward a common goal. Second one is mutual respect. Basically, don't be a horrible person. Everyone deserves respect in this conversation, and if you're not being respectful of the other person, they're not going to want to respect you either, and this conversation is going to go nowhere. So this is another situation. They give you 3 things to work on for how to make this happen. First, apologize when it's appropriate. If your apology is not appropriate, they're going to use a skill called contrast, where you address the other person's concerns, confirm your respect for them, and then clarify your position. Re-explain it to them in a way that they would understand better so that we can understand what misinterpretation has happened here. And then finally, create that mutual purpose that we discussed just a second ago. So in chapter 6, we have Master My Stories, how to stay in dialogue when you're angry, scared, or hurt. And this is all about the stories that we tell ourselves about what other people are doing, because it's very rare that all of our assumptions are correct. So this discusses the path to action. It's how we get from an action that has occurred to the feeling that we have about what just happened. Basically, someone performs an action, we observe it, then we decide in our brains that there has been a motive and that we should judge this action based off of this motive. We don't necessarily know what that motive actually is. And then we feel an emotion based on the action that we have ascribed a motive to. And this emotion is what can lead us to being angry, scared, or hurt. So before we have a bad conversation where we hurt someone's feelings or we're too angry to get down to the real truth, this book suggests that we examine where we sit emotionally, determine whether we have good evidence for the story that we told ourselves, and ask whether it's actually necessary for us to be doing the things that we are doing in telling this story. Chapter 7 is State, all caps, My Path, how to speak persuasively, not abrasively. This is sort of a additional point to the previous story, where we're trying to get past telling ourselves stories and assumptions and get to the real meat of the issue. And so they give us this handy-dandy little list. State. First, share your facts. You're going to want to tell people what you actually know. Then you tell your story. And when you tell your story, you want to make sure that you're pointing out that these are just what you feel and what your assumptions are. It's not necessarily fact. You're going to ask for other people's paths. Basically, you're going to tell other people to do the same thing that you just did. Get a full story of the whole situation. Talk tentatively. Like I said, whenever we share our stories and assumptions, we need to make sure that everyone knows these are stories and assumptions, not facts. And then encourage testing. We're inviting opposing views, and we are meaning that we are inviting opposing views. We are doing this sincerely so that we can come to an understanding. Chapter 8 is Explore Others' Paths, how to listen when others blow up or clam up. We want to make it safe for others to share their stories. And how do we do that? We have a list of listening tools. There are 4 of them, and then the ABCs, 3 things that we can do to help make it safe. The 4 listening tools are to ask for input, mirror to confirm feelings. This is where you describe how people look or act. You paraphrase to acknowledge their story. Repeat what they have said back to them in your own words to seek clarification, acknowledge understanding, and then prime when you're getting nowhere. You sort of add your own part of the dialogue in so that you can pull them back into the conversation. And then the ABCs are don't turn an agreement into an argument. Like if you're agreeing, you should already agree, build on that, build more agreement, point out more things that you agree on, and then compare the differences calmly. We don't want to be angry. Calm down and just compare the differences so that we can figure out what's going on. So we have Chapter 9, Move to Action, how to turn crucial conversations into actions and results. So this is where we take the conversation that we already had and make sure it actually becomes something. In this chapter, we discuss the different methods of decision making. These aren't terribly important to us as students. Just because we are not making many of these types of decisions yet, a lot of this book is geared toward a corporate entity, but here are the 4 methods of decision making. We have command, things are made outside of our control. This is what students will mostly be dealing with. We have consult, decision makers invite others to influence them before making the choice. Vote, sort of self-explanatory there. And the consensus, we talk until everyone decides to one decision. And then how do we choose? how we're going to make the decision. We want to know who cares, who knows, who must agree, and how many people is it worth involving. Who's going to be involved, who's going to be affected by it, who has the expertise, whose cooperation are we going to need for the authority to make the decision, how many people is it worth involving, and so on. And then once we have all this information down, we're going to make assignments. We're going to tell people who's going to do what by when and how are we going to follow up on this thing being done, and we're going to write it down so that we know who's supposed to have done what. Chapter 10 is Yeah But, Advice for Tough Cases. It's just 17 tough cases and how to go through it. This chapter was a little bit suspicious, but I'm not going to talk about it yet. We'll come back to this one. But this is just the list of tough cases. But we'll come back to this. You'll see my highlighted ones here. Chapter 11 is then putting it all together. It was just a summary chapter. It came back. These are the chapter titles that they wrote down in the summary chapter. So these are basically the line items that they really want you to focus on. So they have Start with the Heart, Learn to Look, Make It Safe, Master My Stories, State My Path, Explore Others' Paths, and Move to Action. And then they ended the book with It's not about communication, it's about results. So what did I learn from this book? The most important thing that I learned here is pay attention to other people, right? You can only do so much with yourself. Really everything that you can do is about yourself. There's only so much that you can do if you only live on your own head and pay attention to only yourself. You really need to be able to take yourself and put yourself into other people's shoes, look at them and be able to understand what is happening with them. Along with self, the second item I have on here is maintain the sanctity of your sense of self and objectives, right? So when we are focusing on ourselves, we need to focus on not just how we feel, but why we feel that way and what our goals are in the conversation. Because if we only focus on how we feel, we're going to go, dang, I'm angry, and then we're just going to be angry. We need to go, I'm angry, and the reason I'm angry is because of this thing that happened, and this thing that happened because of this, and this is what we need to actually talk about in order to get to the root cause of the issue. So then the last one I have is just don't be an awful person. This is going to come up in the review here in just a second, but most of this book, the takeaway that I got from it is this is common sense. And as long as you're not a horrible person, this should come pretty easily for you. And I don't want to say that specifically because a lot of people do struggle with the ways that conversations work, and crucial conversations in particular are conversations where things can go really hairy really fast. You know, these are hard conversations that we're having, not just like with ourselves and with other people, but in basically the very fabric of our souls. Like, this can really mess you up. And sometimes it's a big struggle to get through with that. So I don't want to overshadow the people who really do struggle with this and could benefit from this book. I just wasn't that person. And that's sort of the review that I have of this book. Like, I felt like a lot of the chapters repeated themselves over and over and over again. And I know that our professor really enjoys repeating over and over again, and that's important for learning, right? And I understand, you need to look at something at least 3 times to really learn it, but I felt like I looked at the same thing 11 times over the course of this book, with maybe like one extra thing thrown in each chapter. I did have things to say to you after reading this book. We just spent 10 or 12 minutes on a presentation about it, but I feel like there are just surface level ideas. Like, there's merit for other people. It could have been deeper. There could have been more. And I don't feel like I personally learned anything. And as for the information that felt suspicious and strange, we'll come back here to chapter 10. I have these 3 cases highlighted. The first one was sexual or other harassment. The advice that the authors gave was handle this in private. And I don't think I really need to explain how suspicious that is, because sometimes that is horrifying to do, and a lot of the time we need help, and so I'm not sure that that was the correct advice to put out for sexual or other harassment. And then regretting saying something horrible, their advice was don't say something horrible to start with. I'm sorry, but that is not what they were asking for assistance with. They said that I regretted saying something horrible, which means it's already happened. And I feel like that has damaged the credibility of the authors in my mind, that they have responded to this particular question incorrectly. And so my review of the book, it was really repetitive. I don't think it really helped me. There were some things that damaged the credibility of the authors, but I think it was pretty good in general. Anyway, so thank you so much for joining me in my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a wonderful rest of your day.